Okay, I think we're going to get things going here. I want to say hello to everyone. I hope everyone's having a wonderful Tuesday. I am pleased to present Chris Cluff, President of Paper Trails. He's going to be going over all the details about Maine Earned Paid Leave, the new law set to go into effect in January. If you could please make sure you're muted, and then I'm sure Chris would be more than willing to answer questions at the end. And we can go through and make sure everyone's questions are answered. We will also be recording this session, so it will be on YouTube afterwards. If you missed something or want to go back, it will be on our Go Kennebunks YouTube page. So Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks all for joining us. We've got a pretty good group today. I feel like I get all the exciting topics to talk about. Elena was saying, you know, we get such good participation, but we just have such good things to talk about, I guess. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the new Maine Earned Paid Leave law. The governor signed this bill into law actually in 2018, with it going into effect this coming year, January 1st. So this does apply to businesses with more than 10 employees. And what it basically says is you now have to provide paid leave to every employee. You have to provide up to 40 hours a year of paid leave that can be used for sick, vacation, personal, emergency time. There can be no restrictions on what the leave can be used for. This is a minimum requirement. So, you know, if you already have a more substantial time off package, you may be okay, but I definitely think that it's worth reviewing your PTO policy or vacation policy to make sure that you're in compliance. We've already been talking to a lot of clients, and I've said, okay, maybe you want to create, you know, a couple of different policies, some for your part-time or temporary staff kind of thing, and you know, one for your more full-time year-round kind of staff. As long as you meet the minimum requirements, you're fine. It doesn't say you can't offer more. It just is a little bit just kind of the minimum. So I think, as with any HR kind of thing, I think a written policy is going to be really important. So be sure to work on your policy. Hopefully we all have handbooks and policies within them. But with this, and we're going to talk a lot more about that, with this, we're going to see a policy be even more important, because I think there's some pitfalls and protections that you want to make sure you put in place for yourself, so that you're not, you're being fair to you and to your employees. So let's look at eligibility requirements. So what businesses are, I guess, why it's not eligible here, you're required. What businesses are required to provide this paid leave? It's all employers with more than 10 or more Maine employees. Common ownership rules do apply. So if you own two businesses with 5 employees each, and you are a shareholder in both of those businesses, both businesses will qualify. The rules so far say it's 10 bodies. So it could be 1 full-time person and 9 part-time people, but 10 people, that is the qualification for falling into this policy. So it is not full-time equivalents, as some other you know, laws profess. It's basically 10 people, 10 bodies. Seasonal businesses. So seasonal businesses, we colloquially talk about seasonal businesses, you know, hotels, restaurants, things like that. You have to be a designated seasonal business by the Department of Labor to be exempt from this, which means you must be open less than 120 days per year. You have to apply and be given seasonal status by the Department of Labor if you would like to be exempted from this. It applies to very few people, because very few businesses are open less than 120 days per year. So that would be one of the only exemptions from this. All classes of employees should be included in this paid leave. Full-time, part-time, seasonal, per diem, temporary, anybody that you put on payroll is eligible to earn paid leave from day one. The state estimates that this is going to cover about 85% of Maine employees, so they're really trying to get out there. They definitely went with a more broad plan of paid leave rather than just a sick or vacation policy. You know, sick is the big one across the country. This is for everything, so they can earn up to 40 hours. Let's talk about tracking that earned time. So You can either give your employees a lump sum of 40 hours at the beginning of the year, or you can accrue it with every payroll. I strongly recommend that you would accrue this with every payroll, because if someone leaves in the middle of the year, you have to do some fancy footwork to figure out what they're going to give back and what you are owed and so forth. The easiest way to do it is accrue with every payroll. What this means is they'll earn 0.025 hours of earned time per hour worked, or basically 1 hour of earned time for every 40 hours that they work. So if someone is part-time, say they work 20 hours in a week, they're only going to get half an hour of earned time on that payroll, okay? So it's, an accrual is going to be a lot more, and it's going to help you stay in compliance with the policy. This earning can be capped at 40 hours per year. So if someone works 40 hours for 40 weeks, the last 12 weeks of the year, they don't get any earned time if you're following this policy strictly. Again, that does not mean you can't have a higher policy. You can't offer them 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. This just says you have to offer them at least this 40 hours. And likewise, so someone may work 30 hours and over the course of 52 weeks, they hit that 40-hour mark, and that's how it is. Remember, this is the minimum, so you can offer more, but you can't offer any less. I would make sure they have a good system in place to track this. It's going to be a pain in the butt if you're trying to do this in a spreadsheet. So I would talk to your payroll provider. For our clients, we're taking care of this for you. It's very simple for us to set up. You're going to want to make sure you track how it accrues and when it's used. So like I said, make sure you're keeping track of that. For salaried employees, the state rules assume that they work 40 hours per week and accrue as such unless it's otherwise documented. So for salaried employees, you're going to want to make sure that you have a plan in place for how many hours per week they typically work, and make sure that their accrual is set up proportionally. So now that we've accrued it, we've earned the time, let's talk about how to use the earned time. So the employees can use that earned time for any reason. Unexpected illness, vacation, personal time, emergency, bereavement, any reason. So they have to be paid at the same rate as their normal pay. If they are tipped employees, the rules right now show that you should just pay them at minimum wage, the full minimum wage rather than the tipped minimum wage. You can require that an employee works 120 days before using their time. So if you're a seasonal business, say you hire a dishwasher for the summer, you can say, hey, you started June 1st, you're going to accrue from day one, but you can't use it until October 1st. And that may help you with some folks that are only around for a couple of months. But again, the only thing about that is you're going to want to have in your policy what happens when they leave, because they've got some accrued time on the books. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. Employees can be required to give up to 4 weeks of notice for non-emergent leave. So you should set up a in your leave policy, state how they have to request the time off. Do they have to go to their supervisor? Is there an online system that you're using, like our payroll system, for example, that they can go in and request the time off? For emergent leave, the employee should give notice as soon as is practical. That's the wording right out of the Department of Labor rules, is as soon as is practical. So obviously, I think we're probably going to run into some issues with this. It's going to take some time for everyone to get used to. We know there's going to be employees that are probably going to abuse this, but it's definitely something that's going to have to be worked through. The employer may deny any non-emergent leave based on the business needs. So say everyone wants the week of Christmas off. That doesn't, just because they have the time on the books doesn't mean you have to let them use it if you have 5 other people out that same week. You can deny it based on a business need. So just like any other vacation or PTO policy, you can work around the business's need in using this. So you're not pigeonholed into using, not being able to run your business, which is nice. So let's talk about some details of what this looks like. So I would recommend you set a 1-year period and then be consistent. Again, put it in your policy. Is it their calendar year? Is it based on their anniversary? Is there another period that's based on a business need, maybe a seasonality? Because the employees can carry it over but they still can't earn more than 40 hours in any given year. So if someone carries over 20 hours, they can only accrue another 20 hours the next year. So you can only have basically 40 hours on the books at any time. So any payout on employee termination is determined by your policy. You do not have to pay it out if they leave. So say someone works for you for a month and they've got 3 or 4 hours on the books. When they leave, you don't have to pay that out. However, you need to be consistent with your policy. So make sure whatever your policy says is going to go. I will tell you, we've had some clients that have dealt with this in the past. When your policy is not clear, the Department of Labor sides with the employee. So basically what's going to happen is if your policy isn't clear on what this looks like and the employee calls the state, they're going to say pay it out. So make sure that if you don't want it paid out, you state that very clearly. Remember when we talked about accruals versus giving the bucket of hours? If you front load your hours, if you just give them 40 hours January 1, if they leave on May 1st, you do have the right to deduct unearned hours from their last paycheck. But you have to track that. So that means you have to go back to January 1st, figure out how many hours they worked, how many hours they earned, and then reconcile that when they leave. So rather than going through that whole process, I think it's definitely a lot easier just to accrue as you go. So again, they're going to earn 1 hour of PTO for every 40 hours that they work, or that 0.025. You can require your employees to use their time in a 1 hour increment. So if someone says, hey, I was 15 minutes late today, can I use 15 minutes of my paid time so I still hit my 40 hours? You have the right to say no, you have to use an hour. So just from an administrative perspective, the state's tried to put some guardrails around this to make it a little bit less burdensome from an administrative perspective. This one's definitely going to kick some of us in the butt. Employees who leave and return within 1 year are entitled to any earned time that they were not paid out upon their departure. So if you have someone that worked June, July, and August last year, and they come back May 15th the next year, if you did not pay out that time, you have to put the time back in their bucket on May 15th the following year. It's going to be a little bit of a headache for returning seasonal employees, and we're going to have to keep track of that on that. If employees leave within 1 year, let me just read this again. Employees who leave and return within 1 year are not subject to the wait if they previously worked 120 days. So remember we said that you can require a 120-day wait. If your employee leaves and comes back within that year and they've already worked 120 days, you can't require another 120-day wait. So the 120 days is a one-time deal. So also think about that with your seasonal employees. And employers shall not deny an employee the right to use this paid leave, but there are exceptions. And obviously we talked about those exceptions as far as business need and so forth. If someone calls out sick, you reasonably cannot deny them the ability to use their paid leave as sick time. So it's definitely going to be something that is a little bit gray for a while. The state has given us a lot of documentation on this. I'm going to give you the links in just a few minutes, but definitely something to keep an eye on as you're writing your policies and implementing this plan. So we're back to policy, right? You want to make sure you write a good policy. The first rule in any HR thing is consistency. Be consistent with how you write your policy. Be consistent with how you administer your policy. I was talking to a client this morning and I said, in small business, there seem to be more exceptions than rules. And we find that people, I hired someone and I'm going to give them, 20 hours more of PTO than anybody else. I would encourage you to be consistent. Write a policy, stick with it. Because otherwise, I think you're going to find that you're going to create yourself more headaches. And if there ever is a challenge with the Department of Labor, they're going to come back and say, well, what did your policy say? And you're going to say it said this, and they're going to say, you didn't do that. You didn't follow your own policy. So it's going to leave you open to that liability. So in your policy, you want to make sure you indicate who's eligible, which in this situation is just about everybody, how time accrues, how it's used, how they can request the time off, what happens when an employee leaves, does it get paid out or not? And you probably want to put some provisions around those returning employees. If you are a returning employee, this is what happens. Make sure you're tracking those. And who tracks the policy and whom do they contact if there's a question or issue? You want to make sure that all those things are in your policy in there. Remember, you may have an existing policy that works just fine, but you got to go through and make sure it checks all the boxes. We've gone through several of these policies with clients already. A lot of people are just making tweaks to make sure that they're on track. Some people are writing separate policies for different classes of employees, kind of thing. It's completely up to you, but again, you just have to meet the minimum requirement. There is a new labor law poster. It's free on the Department of Labor. You probably get mailers and things like that from people telling you to buy labor law posters from them. Don't ever do that. They're free. You can get them free on the Department of Labor website. You can also get them on our website, papertrailspayroll.com/resources. We post them there, again, for free. They do have to be posted in a prominent space, so your break room, wherever the time clock is, any of those places, there's a whole slew of them, federal and state labor law posters that need to be done. The state has updated this regulation of employment poster so that you can, with the new paid time off piece, so that you can update that. So go print that off and put that in the break room. We're happy to help you with this. For our existing clients, we're going to track and report all of this time for you. We'll help you, get your policy built in our system. No cost. That's included in what we already do today. If you need help writing a policy to make sure you're consistent and within the rules, we'll do that. If you need help putting a handbook together, we're happy to help you with that as well. So if you are looking for further guidance on that, please feel free to reach out to us and we will be happy to help you. So that is the whirlwind of earned paid leave, and I'm happy to answer questions of which I'm sure there are many. So fire away. So I just noticed there is a question from someone in the chat. Can you define 10 or more employees? Is it FTE or actual bodies? It is actual bodies. That is the guidance as of right now. It's not FTE.
Chris, we have
Want
a
the
question
questions
from
in the
Mary
chat
Ann.
room, Chris?
I don't know, Elena, how we usually do it? We can either...
I see a hand raised, but I know Gary also has a question. So why don't we start with Gary first and then Mary Ann is next.
Go for it, Gary.
I was looking for a distinct exclusion in the statute or in the DOL sheet here that says this is not a new category of leave for long established and existing positions. I don't find that. So does this create a new form of PTO for all employees?
So it doesn't necessarily create a new category of PTO. Well, I guess it does. If you don't want to change your existing policy, it does. You have to meet this minimum. If right now, a lot of businesses say, I'm going to give 80 hours of vacation and 10 days of sick time. And that's how your policy is written. Today, you have to offer basically PTO, which is a paid time off, which has no restrictions on it. So they can use that for whatever they want. So the state is somewhat forcing everybody's hand to go to a PTO model rather than doing that sick and vacation model. We're basically advising most of our clients to go to that model as well. Otherwise, you could use this for, if you have had employees that have been with you forever, you could slightly adapt your policies and say, hey, we're going to still give you, 5 weeks of vacation or whatever, but we're going to call it PTO now. Otherwise, you were going to have to create a separate category of earned time for those people if you don't want to adjust your existing policies.
But how do I tell people that have been working here for years that they do not get this extra time earned? I don't see how I can tell them they do not get it.
Well, they're already getting they're already getting time off, presumably, right? So that it doesn't entitle them to more time off.
That's my question.
It doesn't entitle them to any more time off. It just is forcing you to adapt your policy to make sure you meet the state's minimum.
But one could read this that it is new and in addition to what they already get.
The state is in the guidance, the state has said this is a minimum requirement. If you have a stronger policy in place, you're fine. As long as you meet all the guidelines, as long as it's at least 40 hours. The biggest one we're seeing is as long as it applies to all employees full-time, part-time, seasonal, per diem, temporary, all employees from day one, and as long as they are able to use it for anything. So you're just going to have to kind of take a look at your existing policy and see how it's written and make some adjustments based on that.
Thank you.
So a couple of questions in the chat. Would you mind doing an example? If someone has 10 hours a week year round, so I'm just going to do my adding machine here. So remember we said 0.025 hours earned per hour worked. So 0.025 times 10 hours, that means they're going to get 0.25 or a quarter of an hour of PTO per week times 52 weeks is 13 hours. So if they only work 10 hours a week, if you use the minimum requirement, they're going to earn 13 hours of earned paid time per year.
Chris, there was also Mary Ann had her hand up.
Mary Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question in regards to something wasn't making sense to me on the people that, because we do have a couple of seasonal people. So when they come in, we have to offer them right off the bat the 40 hours and whatever we decide, whether, I guess whether we accrue it or give it to them all at once. Then they leave, they come back the next season. So you're not just going to start off with an automatic 40. You have to look back at last. I'm a little confused on that.
Sure. So I wouldn't give them 40 hours if you know they're going to be temporary. I would do an accrual model, first of all.
Right.
Second of all, you will have to track it. If they come back within a year and you did not pay within 365 days. So I hate to be, a little mean, I guess, but if they worked for you June 1st to August 31st this year, you may want to wait. Well, I guess you wouldn't be able to do that. Never mind. If you don't pay it out when they leave on August 31st, yes. If they come back June 1st next year, you're going to have to go back and stack their bank with what they had when they left, because they've returned within 365 days. So if they're gone 366 days, you don't have to do that. And again, that waiting period kind of follows them. So if they worked 120 days, they met their 120-day period at one point.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of their lifetime 120-day period. If they work, and I can talk to you offline, Mary, if you have a specific couple of examples.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I understand what you're saying now.
It's definitely going to be a tracking.
So what if we're on a calendar, right? And so we do have the PTO model, so that's good, but we don't accrue. So
Sure.
Can you do regular and just accrue seasonal people? Like, can we do both?
Absolutely. You can absolutely set up different policies for different classes of employees. You just have to make sure that it meets the minimum. So if you said, my full-time employees, I'm going to give them their bucket of hours on January 1 because I trust them, that's great. And then if you have part-time, temporary, seasonal employees who we're going to just set up a separate policy which meets the bare minimum, and this is what it is. So you can just set up two different policies for two different classes of employees.
I understand.
You just have to make sure both policies still meet the minimum requirement. So, and I have yet to find a PTO policy, maybe one. I think I've seen one that I've looked at with a client that 100% meets these requirements. So I would just take a look at that. So
Thank you.
I got another question from the chat. Can we have full-time employees get the 40 hours at the beginning of the year and part-time accrue per pay period or in the same company? Yes, absolutely. We just talked about that. You can have two different policies that you set up however you like. Just make sure you're clear on the different classes of employees. A question about carryover. Can they carry over the 40 hours? Yes, they can carry over the 40 hours. However, the earning per year is capped or can be capped at 40 hours if you want it to be. So if you want, the policy allows you to carry over the 40 hours, but what that means is you won't earn any more hours in the subsequent year because you're capped at that 40 hours. You can allow your employees, if you'd like, to carry over as much as you want. But again, the minimum requirement is that if they carry over, they can only cap at 40 hours a year. Hope that makes sense. Paul, I saw you get your hand up.
Hi, Chris. A couple of questions. First one, it may be just a terminology thing, but you said when the staff return, so say they get 30 hours, they accrue that, they then go away, come back within the 12-month period. You said you have to stack the bank. You don't give them the money, you just put it back in their bucket.
Correct.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That was the first thing. And the second thing, we fluctuate. I mean, I'm not sure if we will this year, but generally we go over and above and then below 10 employees. We could be down to 6 or 7, come January, but then up to nearly 20 in the summer. Do I look at an average? Any thoughts?
So the state has not issued any guidance on that yet, because I looked at that. I mean, we certainly have a lot of seasonal people around here that fluctuate. I mean, we have some businesses that go to 100 employees in the summer. My read on it is that the requirement goes into place as soon as you hit 10 employees. So if in January of this year, for example, you only have 6 or 7, come May, when you hire back up for the summer, you hit 10, you're going to have to start offering this policy. Now, the question becomes, what happens in November when you go back to 6 or 7? I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately, but I would say that in general, once you have something like this in place, that you don't just get to be exempt from it again. The state has issued really good guidance on this, but that's one thing they haven't touched on. So it may be a note to call Department of Labor on specifically. So.
Great. Okay, I shall be on the phone to the Department of Labor. Thank you very much.
Another question in the chat, what's the easiest way accounting-wise to transition from a sick and vacation model to a PTO model? From an accounting perspective, you're talking about accrued expenses. That's something you should talk with your accountant, your CPA about, how they want to handle that. I would assume, you want to make this as effortless for your employees as possible. So if they have a bank of hours, I would just kind of mush those together. Say, hey, you had 10 hours of sick and 30 hours of vacation left. We're going to give you 40 hours of PTO, and starting January 1, we're going to this new model. I think it's just going to be what works best for your business. We're obviously, we're talking about this in October, almost November here, because this is going to take some time for everyone to figure out. I don't expect everybody, and I don't really think the state expects everybody to be 100% compliant come January 1. So I think there's certainly some leeway, but I think you have to kind of figure out what the best way for your business to do that is. And obviously I think you want to be fair to your employees, and I think you want to be fair to the business. So holiday time. We work year round, so we often don't give holiday time. Can holiday time count towards this? I don't know. I don't see why not. Well, if you're requiring, I don't think you can require them to use this for holiday, now that I think about it. I think if you are giving them holiday time, that's more of a benefit that they're getting. The paid leave is more of the employee's discretion than the employer's discretion. So I don't think you could require them to use require them to use their paid leave for a holiday. I think they could use it if they wanted to. So if someone wanted to take July 4th off, they could use it, but I don't believe you as the business could require them to do that. A couple more questions. I have hourly employees, and I also have some salespeople paid only commission. How do I track commission people? Lisa, I think the answer to that is you need to figure out what their average hours are. We talked about how we treat salaried employees, and we assume that salaried employees are 40 hours a week, unless otherwise specified. So I think for your commission people, I think you're going to want to figure out what their average number of hours is and base it on that. I think that's probably going to be the easiest way to do that, is to just set it on average. Otherwise, the only other option really is for them to require them to track their time, which I know they're not going to want to do, and you're probably not going to want them to do either. So certainly, a little bit of a gray area. The state, as far as I know, has not given us guidance on those kind of commissioned employees. So it's certainly something to kind of noodle around, but I would treat them like a salaried employee. So that's all I had someone ask for the first slide. I'm assuming you want my contact information. Put that up there. Oh, another question. So for restaurants, I have questions about servers. Shifts are always being swapped and schedules come out weekly based on employee availability. How do we figure out what qualifies as a day off? Can we just ask us to add a PTO to any week if they choose? I think that's going to have to be in your policy. So I would make sure, if it's a discretionary time off, if it's a non-emergent time off, I think you probably ought to say you have to specifically request that PTO off 7 days or 14 days in advance. That's something that I think it's going to be more of a policy and a procedure kind of thing. I know a lot of people will allow employees to just, hey, we didn't hit 40 hours this week. Can I have 5 hours of PTO? I think that's also a discretionary piece with you as a business owner, is how you're going to handle that. Are you going to be the nice person, or are you going to stick to the rules and kind of go from there? So I definitely see that in the restaurant environment where people are swapping all the time, and how that's going to work and how that could add to your labor costs, because certainly if you have people swapping and they say, oh no, someone's covering my shift, but I need to use PTO. Well, now you're kind of doubling your labor costs for that shift. So it's certainly something to consider. And like I said, I would be a little more strict in my requests and policies, how we're going to handle that. So we pay teachers per class and have some that just sub. Do we have to pay our subs for PTO too? So yes, everybody that's on payroll is eligible for this. Like you said, full-time, part-time, seasonal, per diem, any way they work. Similar to that commission model, Tiffany, I think you're going to want to come up with some sort of hour model. So I know you pay per class. I would say, 1 hour equals 1 class rather than, per class, something like that. I think you're going to have to equate some sort of time with it, or an average number of hours per week. I think for you, where there are some people that just work here and there, I think it's going to be changing the model from a dollar amount payout to an hourly rate. And, each class is 1 hour, for example, or 1.5 hours. So.
Chris, I had a question or two.
Yeah.
I think I have two, but it's like 2.5, maybe 3.
Sure.
Because it goes into effect on January 1st, I'm assuming that means the state is expecting everyone to set a January to December accrual period. That's you can't say, oh, we're going to start at March 1st and people are going to accrue from March 1st to March 1st, right? I mean, people have to start accruing everyone in theory should have to start accruing on January 1st, correct?
So in the rules, it does allow you to set whatever 12-month period you want. So you could say, I want to do it on anniversary date, for example. That's probably the most common other one. But again, if you're a seasonal business, you may want it to start on June 1st instead. However, I think to maintain compliance, you're going to have to come up with some sort of proration from January to June or January to their anniversary date to be in compliant.
Right. You'd have to give them some extra days that catch them up to their whatever you started out
Exactly.
with,
So I think,
which will be that would be messier, in fact.
For sure. I think it certainly is going to be a lot easier to do January 1, but I recognize that January 1 doesn't always come easy. It's, certain businesses have different things going on, and it isn't right for everybody. So they did give you some flexibility, but you just have to come up with some sort of proration of how you're going to handle that from January 1st until whenever it becomes effective.
And okay, so that answers that one. The other one I had, the two other questions I had relate to full-time staff. Is it still, well, from what I understood, it was still a little bit up in the air, some of the issues around full-time staff, or maybe it's not, maybe it's all sorted, but I'm assuming that, and we give more vacation than this already, but I'm assuming that if an employer did not give their full-time staff a minimum of say 52 hours, one for every 40-hour week they worked in a year. So if an employer didn't give their full-time staff paid time off equivalent to 52 hours a year, that would be their new baseline minimum for full-time staff too, correct?
So it's 40 hours. It caps at 40 hours, not
Oh,
50.
caps at 40, that's right, because
Yep.
it caps at 40.
So yes, that would be the new baseline. So say you have a full-time employee that only, for whatever reason, they get 24 hours
Right.
in a year. That's how you've got it set up. We're going to give you 3 days off or something.
Right.
Yes, the new baseline, even for full-time, would be that 40-hour minimum.
And so the other thing was, from what I have understood I think it was a Maine municipal. I'm not in a municipal department, but I'm the director of the library in Biddeford, and we are a private nonprofit. So we have attended municipal sort of association sessions before, where we learned that you're allowed to define full-time however you like, even though you still have to abide by certain federal laws that define things around 40, but we define full-time as 37.5. Does that mean that, I assume that means that, again, 40 supersedes whatever our definition is, because that's part of the state law?
Correct.
Okay.
So I think you definitely can use, I mean, to be honest with you, the definition of full-time doesn't really come into account at all, because this applies to every employee. So,
right. But I guess my
but
question is,
from your policy perspective, the minimum would then be 40, regardless of the number of hours they work per week.
I guess what I was thinking is, we can't stipulate, not that we would want to, because this is just nickel and diming people, but we can't stipulate 1 hour for every 37 and a half hours people work, because that's what we define as full-time. You have to do 40, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So, really quick, I just wanted to pull up Maine Department of Labor website here. I think this is sharing. Hopefully everyone can see this. There's some really good questions and answers on here. You can come read the law. You can come read the requirements. Here's that labor law poster. There's some brief points about the law. The FAQs are really good. They've given a lot of questions in here. Different things in here. There's a detailed frequently asked questions section, which is several pages, 10 pages of different examples and different options. So certainly check this out. This is how I created this presentation, was basically by reading this website. So certainly kind of check this out. And again, you can read the rules, read the law. The law is very basic. The law left a lot to Maine Department of Labor to interpret, and the rules are much more specific. And that's where they came up with a lot of this stuff. Question on casual labor, non-payroll employees. So I'm thinking 1099s or contractors. Those people are not eligible for this. Only W-2 employees are required to be covered under this law.
Chris, another question. There's nobody else here. Do you have the statute, the section 637 in front of you?
I can pull it right up. I've got it on this website. Got it right here.
On the first page, number 9, entitled preemption.
Yep.
My question before was, where does it say this is not a new category? And now I read preemption, a municipality, you got it on your screen, okay.
Yep.
There it is, folks, and I guess I'm confused. That kind of says that we cannot have a town policy that regulates earned paid leave other than this one, if I'm reading plain English there.
Yep. So that says, I was on the board of selectmen in Kennebunk. I can't create an ordinance in the town of Kennebunk that preempts this rule. There is a statute in the state that's called the home rule, basically, that allows municipalities to supersede the state in some situations. This says that the municipality cannot supersede this in that situation. I don't believe that would stop the Portland, for example. I think you might see them take a more generous approach to this. They may say 40 hours isn't enough. We want to add 80 hours. I think that may be allowed. I'm not an attorney, so I can't speak to exactly what the law intends. And this has not been challenged in court yet. So I think leads a lot up to interpretation. As you can see, the law itself is pretty short. If you go back and you look at the rules that Department of Labor has extrapolated from this very short law,
Yeah.
are significantly longer and significantly more in depth. So, it's certainly something to read. I would read the rules over the law.
But when I read that preemption clause in the statute, it kind of tells me in plain English, I cannot have an earned paid time off section in my personnel policy.
So I don't think, do you work for a municipality, Gary?
Yes, Town of Waterboro.
Okay, so I would assume that means that the municipality can't enact an ordinance, not you as you're an employer, that the Town of Waterboro is an employer who has to follow this rule the same as every other small business. If you want, I don't know what MMA, if they've given out any guidance on this, it may be worth a call to MMA or even Department of Labor to see what they say. But I think you can have any other policy. You just have to make sure this meets the minimum. And that is one of the FAQs. I think one of the first ones I saw was, what if I already have, what happens if I already have a policy? And basically the answer is you can use that policy as long as it meets the minimum. But if it doesn't meet the minimum, you're going to have to change it to meet the requirements.
Yeah, it would just be nice if the statute or the rules would really clearly say that.
And I think, with any new, we saw this, the last big regulatory thing that I feel like I went through was ACA. And for the first 2 years, we did ACA filings and reportings and made sure everything was good. I don't think the insurance companies knew what was going on. I don't think IRS knew what was going on. And I think Department of Labor in this situation, they've tried their best to think of every scenario. And my guess is if I was Department of Labor, they're looking at small businesses. They're not necessarily looking at municipalities. I think, oftentimes in state law, we see municipalities segregated. It actually surprises me that they didn't exempt municipalities from this rule, from this law. But, because usually we see municipalities exempted from a lot of laws, right? The state and the municipality are exempt. We see that a lot. But I would reach out to MMA. I would reach out to the Department of Labor. I'd get MMA on this. That's what you pay them for. I'd say, hey guys, can you give us some guidance on this? You do the legwork, you call Department of Labor, this is only going to help all 500 municipalities that are members of yours. Let's get it figured out. So.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm not seeing any more hands. I don't have any questions in the chat. Any other, anything else before we wrap up? Seeing none.
Okay.
I think
Chris,
we're
thank
to
you.
wrap up.
Thank you so much. And everyone, if anyone has any questions or just, wants to review the session again, please know it will be on YouTube later today. We'll be posting the link on 3 Towns, 1 Community. And Chris, your email is, in case anyone has any.
Chris@papertrailspayroll.com. Once we get the recording for this, I will also post it on our website under the blog. And I have a full article about this going over everything we talked about today with the links to the state and everything that will go on the blog in the next day or so as well. So you can pull that out, and we'll be emailing it out to our clients as well. So,
Thank you all for attending. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, Chris.
bye everybody.